Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for Stomping Out Injustice, brought to you by the Free Billie Allen campaign. My name is April Rain, and I am honored to be your host tonight. Billie Allen is someone who is loved. He is a son, he is a brother, he is an artist, he is a remarkable poet. He has a community of uncles, cousins, aunties, and friends who love and support him. In 1997, Billie Allen was wrongfully convicted of armed robbery and the murder of a security guard, Richard Heflin, at the Lindell Bank and Trust in St. Louis, Missouri. Despite no physical, forensic, nor documentary evidence linking him to the crime, Billie was arrested the next day. The great Brian Stevenson has said, "The death penalty symbolizes whom we fear and don't fear, whom we care about, and whose lives are not valid." The Free Billie Allen campaign is much more than just a hashtag. It's a volunteer-led movement created by our very own Yvette Allen. Yvette has been working tirelessly to free Billie, her brother and best friend, from federal death row, where he has been incarcerated for 24 years for a crime he did not commit. Not only are we gathered here in the fight to bring him home, but we are making the call to end the federal death penalty once and for all.
Sometimes life compels us to be more than bystanders. It snaps at our heels, begging us to wake up and stand up for justice. Sometimes it asks us to make our compassion fierce. Without this kind of fierceness, my greatest fear is that my brother Billie Allen could possibly die in prison before I can help prove his innocence. In 1997, he was wrongly convicted and sentenced to death. Alibi witnesses were denied the chance to provide testimony. Police officers lied under oath and key DNA and other results were never presented at trial. For nearly 25 years, I have been fighting along with my brother to overturn a verdict that mistakenly connects him with a crime he had no part in. Billie is fighting for his life on two fronts. First, as an innocent man on federal death row, and second, as a patient plagued by serious health issues that threaten his ability to fight for a retrial. My brother's an artist, a writer, and an advocate for justice. He's my best friend, my inspiration, and one of the most caring, courageous people I know. He's the reason why I can't be silent about the things that matter. And while the root of my fight for my brother's innocence is founded in my love for him and not wanting to see him murdered at the hands of the United States government, my passion ignited from seeing the proof. So please, join me in lifting the weight of injustice that has suffocated me and my family for far too long. Join me in bringing fierce compassion to Billie's fight for freedom before Trump has the chance to return to office and resume federal executions at the same vigor and speed as his last year in office. Join me in standing up for Billie and for the other 46 men who share his fate on federal death row. As individuals, as states, as a country, our role is to place humanity at the heart of a legal system that is badly broken. All too often, the lives it seeks to condemn are also broken and do not deserve to be locked in cages or death chambers and strapped to an execution chair. We are better than this. Join me in urging President Biden to keep his campaign promises, beginning with an end to the federal death penalty and a willingness to commute the sentences of those currently in prison on federal death row. The United States of America was founded on the cherished ideas of freedom, hope, and opportunity for all. These are the things that make us feel at home, that we belong, that we are valued. And they extend to every American citizen, including my brother Billie. So again, I ask you to join me in standing against injustice. Add your name to Free Billie Allen. and call on President Biden to review my brother's case and bring Billie Allen home.
What a way to ground us in why we are all here tonight. Throughout the program, we'll hear more about Billie's case from those working closest with him, the impact the death penalty has on families, the importance of art in the fight for justice, and much more. Join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag FreeBillieAllen, and Billie is spelled Billie. We must recognize how crucial this moment is. Under the former administration led by Donald Trump, an unprecedented 13 people were executed on federal death row over the span of just 7 months. Following a 17-year hiatus, these were the first executions to take place in America, despite legitimate innocence claims and intellectual disabilities. And Billie Allen could have easily been one of them. While President Biden is the first ever sitting US president to publicly oppose the death penalty, we have yet to see the practice be abolished since he took office, nor meaningful action taken toward abolition. Our first guest today join us to discuss how the criminal legal system failed Billie Allen, make their case for abolishing the death penalty, and walk us through how we can bring Billie back home where he belongs. Please welcome federal defenders Eric Montroy and Sean Nolan, advocate and sister of Billie's Yvette Allen.
Peace, y'all. My name is Cheryl Brown. I'm a community organizer who's been working for the last 10 years towards ending the death penalty. And I'm joined by Sean Nolan, Eric Montroy, and Yvette Allen's sister, Billie Allen. Billie will be joining us momentarily. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day for this really important event. Sean, I'm actually going to go over to you first. If you want to just give a brief introduction to tell us a little bit about the work that you do, and we'll dive into a few questions.
Sure. So my name's Sean Nolan. I'm the chief of the Capital Habeas Unit in the Federal Defender Office in Philadelphia, and we're the largest capital habeas unit in the country. We represent people in various parts of the country when we're appointed by federal judges to handle their cases in capital post-conviction. We do exclusively capital cases, nothing else, so we're only working on death penalty cases. We do not get our clients until after they're convicted and sentenced to death. And in obvious trouble at that point. And then we put together a team in our office, and we litigate their cases as best we can, often for many years. We've had a number of clients executed this past year, sadly, because of the Barr and Trump administration and their rush to execute 13 people. 3 of the 13 that were executed were our clients. One of them was my client, who I represented myself for many years, and I attended his execution and witnessed that execution. But it was a very sad time of those 13 executions over a period of 7 months. We're hopeful, and we can talk about this in a few minutes, but we're hopeful that this administration will do something differently so that we will not again be in this situation in the future.
Thank you, Sean. Speaking of this administration doing something differently, we know Biden and the DOJ announced a few days ago or last week that there would be a moratorium on federal executions. Are you guys excited about that, or what does that still leave us to do?
Well, I was not really excited about that because it's kind of what we already knew. I'm glad. I think it's a step in the right direction, and I'm glad that they formalized it, but it was something that we already knew. We already kind of knew that President Biden was not going to move forward with executions. But simply putting a moratorium in place is not enough, is how we feel about this. We still represent 11 of the men left on federal death row, including Billie, and just issuing a moratorium is not sufficient. And basically, if you look back at what happened under the Obama administration, there was really a de facto moratorium at that time. There wasn't an announced moratorium, but they had never issued a protocol about how to move forward with federal execution. So it was really a de facto moratorium. And so when Obama was leaving office, we asked him, well, we submitted applications for commutations or pardons or various things for different of our clients. And he only acted on one of the 60 or so people on federal death row at the time. And that's what ended us up in this position where Bill Barr was able to move forward with all of these executions. So we don't want to end up in that position again, obviously. It's just a horrible situation for our clients who are executed, and for all of the people in the community and their loved ones who were involved in supporting them. And for us as lawyers too, it's not an easy thing to deal with, having clients executed. It's not, it's something we work extremely hard against for a long time. So we're hopeful that in the next, several years or even shorter term, that the Biden administration will do something more. Commuting sentences, something to end the death penalty federally altogether, and also allow us to have the individual continued litigation in each of our cases to continue to do what we can to get relief for our clients.
Wow, I appreciate you drawing that through line between the Obama administration and the de facto moratorium on executions, and how we still ended up in the Trump administration having what seemed to be, at least in my limited experience with the death penalty movement, an unprecedented amount of executions happen in such a short amount of time. Was that unprecedented, the last few months of the Trump administration and the federal executions that happened?
Absolutely. I mean, they executed 13 people in 7 months. It's unheard of in the history of this country, really, especially the modern history of this country. I mean, as we know, we have some dark periods in our history in the past that things like that would happen, but not in decades and decades has something like this happened. A few years ago, Arkansas tried to execute 8 people in 10 days, which was completely unheard of. They actually executed 4 of the 8. We were involved in some of those. We were able to get some stays. Along with our fellow CHUs in Arkansas and in other parts of the country work in those cases. But this was just unprecedented and completely different. And it was such a rush to do it. Every one of the 13 people who were executed had extremely strong claims one way or the other. Every one of the 13 people who were executed got a stay of execution at one point from a court, which was then ultimately taken away by the US Supreme Court. And when we look back on this now, at the time I had hope. We represented Dustin Higgs, who was the last of the 13 to be executed only several days before Biden was sworn in. And I still had hope even up till that last day when Dustin was being executed that we would have a stay of execution in place. And when I look back at it in hindsight, I just feel kind of foolish that I even had that hope, because this was a runaway train. These 13 executions were a runaway train. The US Supreme Court, members of the US Supreme Court stayed up all night to make sure that stays got taken away in the middle of the night to make sure all of these executions went forward. It was completely unprecedented in the history of this country, and it should be a wake-up call that we do not let this happen again.
And so I want to open this up to both Sean and Eric. With what's been happening in the last 5 or 6 years with the movement for Black Lives, can you situate what's going on with Billie Allen and the federal death row at large, sort of in the context of what's been happening politically for the last several years?
Well, why don't I start? I'll let Eric speak specifically regarding Billie's case, as he's been, one of Billie's main lawyers for many years now. I've been more involved globally as the head of the office in a lot of the things that are going on. But, what we've said all along is that the death penalty, including the federal death penalty, is racially motivated and racially applied. And that's absolutely true. We all know it to be true. And, the events of last summer really brought to a forefront a lot of the racial issues in this country that have been ignored for just so many years. And death penalty is just another part of that, another aspect of that. And that's what people really need to consider. And that's what we're hopeful that this administration will consider, that these movements to try to help solve some of these racial injustices that have just been pervasive in our society for so long need to continue. And the death penalty is a huge part of that. And that's what we're hoping, that the administration will take that into consideration. And when they move, we hear that the administration is going to be moving on some racial justice issues and some social justice issues and criminal justice issues in the next several months. And we're very hopeful that the federal death penalty and the death penalty in general will be a part of that discussion and part of those efforts.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, I think that some of what you saw or what you see if you take a close examination of Billie Allen's case is reflected in what society over the last couple of years is starting to find out in a more intimate way, which is there are fundamental problems with the criminal justice system. I mean, Sean just touched on a major one, which is racism, and certainly that was evident in the prosecution of Mr. Allen, who was an African American prosecuted federally in a death case involving a white victim. We see that across the country. But beyond that problem, there are many other flaws. I mean, I think it was in 2008 or 2009, we filed a habeas petition, myself and some other lawyers working on behalf of Mr. Allen. And in that petition, we set forth numerous claims of constitutional violations that, in our opinion, rendered Mr. Allen's conviction and sentence unconstitutional. And we asked for a new trial and a new sentencing. And among the many claims, the constitutional claims that we raised, some involved Mr. Allen's representation by his lawyers. And we argued that it was deficient, that his lawyers were deficient in their preparation for defending Mr. Allen and also in their presentation at trial. And we presented that to the court, and on the vast majority of those issues, we didn't get a hearing. We never had an opportunity to present those claims at a hearing before a judge and get a determination on the substance following a hearing. We also were denied access to information, discovery, stuff that we've been seeking from the government through the courts, at least since I've been involved, since our office has been involved in 2008, 2009. I'll give you an example. One of the major issues that we continue to seek and is DNA evidence in Mr. Allen's case. One example of that is there was a white strap that was found at the scene of the crime, and it had blood on it. And the government alleged, oh, well, that was a strap that was on Norris Holder, who was Mr. Allen's co-defendant. That was a strap that was located on body armor that he was wearing during the robbery. They didn't test the blood for Mr. Holder's DNA to see if it actually was what he was wearing at the time of the robbery. They tested it against Mr. Allen. It wasn't Mr. Allen's blood. They tested it against the victim in the case, Mr. Heflin. It wasn't his blood. So we've been saying, and we continue to say, what is the reason for not testing the DNA on this strap? It's a crucial piece of evidence. If that blood comes back as not being Norris Holder's DNA, then it's extremely strong evidence that somebody else, not Mr. Allen, was involved in the robbery in this case. And that's all we've asked for. We've said, give us access, let us test this DNA, let us make a showing that if this is not Mr. Allen's, if it wasn't Mr. Holder's blood, it's not Mr. Holder's DNA, then Mr. Allen, I feel as though it's a simple request of the government, a simple request of the courts. Test the DNA and let the chips fall where they may. I think we've seen examples recently. We were talking about Arkansas earlier. The case of Liddell Lee, who much like Mr. Allen, stood by his innocence for years and years and years and just asked to have DNA tested. And the courts in Arkansas refused. Mr. Lee was executed. 4 years later, they finally tested the DNA, and lo and behold, it pointed to another individual. So, I mean, it's clearly, you could see that's the downside of not testing DNA, right? Is that you might execute somebody that's innocent. You balance that against what? Is it the inconvenience of testing DNA? To me, it's a no-brainer, and there's absolutely no justifiable reason in Mr. Allen's case that we don't go ahead and test the DNA on that strap.
And let me just follow up. I mean, we're not asking the government to pay for it. We'll pay for it. We're his lawyers. We will pay for it. And that's how simple this is. If this case happened today, we all know that all DNA would be tested immediately because that's standard procedure. We have a case in Texas that I'm working on right now in which they refuse to test the DNA of our client. And it's just so simple. In that case, there are fingernail scrapings that would show who the actual killer was. And they refuse to test the DNA. And they've set an execution date now for him for this October. And we're still trying to get the government to agree to just give us access to these things. And that's the same thing in Mr. Allen's case. All we want is access to this material. We'll conduct the testing. And I don't understand in that case or in the other case I was talking about, what are they so afraid of? Because as I said, this is routine. This would be done as a matter of course if he were arrested right now, no question.
Wow. So just in the last minute and a half, you both gave me 3 examples of times where DNA was not tested. What reason does the U.S. government give? Are they just saying it's an inconvenience? It's an expensive cost? What's the real reason why they won't allow the DNA to be tested? Or you guys at least access that?
I don't think we know the real reason. They offer up suggestions that it won't exculpate Mr. Allen, or we're just not entitled to it, or there's procedural reasons. I mean, these are the things that you hear routinely. In Mr. Lee's case, I think it was the governor of Arkansas who got up at a press conference and basically just said, "Oh, that wouldn't have changed anything," and ignored it. Of course, that's not true. So it's hard to understand why why the government in Mr. Allen's case and in many other cases just refuse to do something that's so simple and so basic that I think it's pretty universal that everybody could see. Why not test DNA evidence if you have access and the ability to do so? There's not a reason that justifies not doing that.
Wow. So Eric, you've been on Billie's case since 2008, 2009?
That's correct.
So quite a bit of time. Can you tell us a little bit about Billie, how it's been working with him, a little bit about his personality? We want folks at home to know these people that are being held hostage on federal death row aren't just numbers or inmates, but they're people.
Well, the first thing I'll say about Billie is that he has steadfastly maintained his innocence since I first met him. And he is very dedicated to try and let the world know and let the courts know about that. And so it's Billie's somebody who's always thinking, who's always researching, who's always writing. He's very, a really smart guy, really dedicated guy. I enjoy my conversations with Billie. I always have. He's a great person to talk to. And if you've never had a chance to see his artwork, I would highly recommend looking it up. And hopefully, you guys who are doing this will find a way to display some of that artwork, because it's really brilliant stuff. He's a talented individual.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, he is. Billie even painted for my son a picture of a fox. It's represented that we have hanging up downstairs in our living room. Thank you.
Yeah, that goes, obviously you've seen his stuff. You don't need me to tell you.
Oh, it's good for folks to know. Such a huge talent and a huge heart, right?
So I, haven't been involved as long as Eric has and not essentially involved in the litigation of Billie's case, but I've gotten to know him a bit over the last couple of years. As the chief of the unit, a lot of times I go to Terre Haute and I'll see clients, even if I'm not on their case, sometimes just to have a social visit, to check in, so they, deliver messages from the team and things like that. And I've done that with Billie over the years, and we've had several meetings, and I always enjoy the meetings. He's, we talk about reading and what he's reading and what I'm reading, and just normal stuff that people talk about. And I know that sounds strange to people outside of this work and outside of what we do, or just thinking about somebody on death row and how they interact with their lawyers. But that's how we interact with our clients, and that's how I've interacted with Billie, and I've always enjoyed our meetings. I met with him just a couple weeks ago at Terre Haute, and we had a great few hours together.
Yvette, I know that a large part of this first panel was talking to Billie's support team, and you as a sister, the biggest part of his support team, cheerleader, advocate, champion. And as someone who's also a sister, I resonate with a lot of the work that you've been putting in. And I think it would be a miss not to open it up to hear you talk a little bit about your brother.
So there's so many amazing things that I could say about my brother, but I know time is limited. However, I do think it's really important that you all know the person that I'm asking you to help fight for and the person that I've been fighting for the past 24 years. For many of you, there's someone in your life that you hold in high regard because of the great qualities they possess. For me, that person is my brother. My brother is one of the most selfless, one of the most determined, courageous, and positive people I know. You know, unfortunately, when you Google him, you see words like thug, criminal, you know, just words that are completely opposite of the person that I've always known. And I hope that you felt that as you heard him speak today. I hope that you felt his sincerity because the person that, you know, that just spoke with you doesn't belong in prison, let alone death row. I don't want you all to um, take my word or my brother's word for him being innocent. You know, I sincerely hope that you all take the time to read over the information, not just what he has written on the site, but what the courts have said as well. Read it. You know, the proof is there. And after you read it, I just hope that it moves you to want to help, you know, whether it's his case or not. You know, there are far too many Billie Allens. There are far too many people that look like him that are in need of help. And if their story moves you, please just don't sit there. We all have a part to play. So I just hope that in some way, each of you gets involved now and not when it's too late.
All right. So Sean and Eric, for those who are at home watching this, who have been paying attention to what's been going on with death penalty, with Billie's case, what are some things that folks can do at home? What are some action steps for those watching?
Well, I think, I think that we're going to see some action in the next several months from the Biden administration and maybe from Congress. And so, people should support those efforts and make their views known loud and clear to the people that represent them, the people that are elected to represent them, make their views known about what they feel about the federal death penalty, and really highlight the problem of the racism of the federal death penalty, because that's where I think the political traction is really going to be, because we've all come to know that. Those of us who have done this work, I've done exclusively capital work now for 18 years, and we just see how pervasive racism is in the system. And for people at home to realize that and speak out about that to whoever will listen, but particularly to people that are in the positions to make decisions. The decision makers are very, very important in this situation, and those include Congress and the office of the president.
Yeah, I don't think I have really much to add to that. Actually, that was pretty good. Nice job, Sean. That's why you're the chief.
I make a dynamic team. I love it. I appreciate y'all so much for being able to join us. Feel free to come up mute if you're like, Rel, I want to hit this one point. I want to say this one thing.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting Sean and I to come and talk a little bit about our perspective of not only Billie, but of the federal death penalty. And beyond that, I want to thank everybody who's out there supporting Billie Allen and supporting us as we work to obtain justice for him in his case. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric and Sean. I can tell you as an organizer, someone who's been organizing around this issue for like the last 10 years out of college, sometimes we're at odds with lawyers and with legal teams, right? Organizers have their North Star. Legal team has to pay difference to their clients. But it's been such a joy working with you all and learning so much about Billie's case and all you're doing, and how open you've been with the team of advocates and organizers working to get Billie home. You guys are amazing, and we appreciate all the work that you put in. Sincerely.
Thank you. It was great to meet you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Wow, that was so powerful. We should all be more fired up than ever to demand freedom for Billie Allen. While fighting for his innocence, Billie uses art as an instrument to communicate, heal, and resist. His artwork gives him a platform for his voice to be heard and to document his journey, and has become a way for him to breathe through the suffocating weight of the injustice he feels every day. In this fight for his life, art has been his saving grace. Our first performance is one near and dear to our hearts, performing Lone Soldier, an original piece written by Billie Allen himself.
I find myself engaged in a conflict that some have deemed to be a battle between good and evil, truth and lies, right and wrong, and it is I who they have labeled the latter. And despite the characterizations, this battle I fight is not one where a thunderous roar can be heard, followed by the stench of gun smoke and charred flesh, nor is this a battle where bloodstains will taint the same ground where footsteps traveled to and fro. No. This battle is one that will be rooted in the bloodlines and bloodshed of those whose blood painted the stripes on the American flag red, and in the blue sky there waves 50 stars, which are at times saluted or at times draped over the caskets of fallen heroes. Now, I know that there are those who long to take one's words out of context. So know that in no way am I claiming to be a hero or one deserving of a hero's death. I am just one who finds myself facing an enemy, a system that many perceive to be justice, and it has waged a war against me, my character, my family, and the truth. And I only seek to defend myself against charges, convictions, and a sentence where, in the end, my enemy longs to take my life in the pretense of justice. Yet I am the victim of the same system that was meant to protect me. Our battleground will be the Constitution, its amendments, and the same laws that govern this country, which has been said to be the foundation of America's democracy. Now, Lady Justice, though she is supposed to stand to the side, remain blindfolded and impartial, I could have sworn that I saw her remove her blindfold and then tilt the scales of justice in the favor of my enemies who already have the upper hand because of their vast knowledge in the law and their sheer willingness to bend, if not break, the same laws that they swore to protect, yet I waver not. I take my stance as I approach my enemy, grab my weapon, the truth, and I pray that God hears my pleas as I prepare to throw stones at Goliath.
Capital punishment is a violation of sacred human rights. It is immoral and disproportionately applied to the most vulnerable people in our communities, including people of color and those with mental illness. But what isn't discussed as often is how the death penalty impacts communities. Here with us today are people whose lives have been irreversibly impacted by the death penalty to share their experiences of the toll capital punishment takes on families. It is my honor to introduce our next group of speakers. Yvette Allen will be joined by Ollie Gordon, a family member of Emmett Lewis Till and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, and co-founder of the Mamie Till Mobley Memorial Foundation, and LaPrince Young, the brother and advocate of Mr. Liddell Lee, an innocent man who was wrongfully executed in 2017.
First I'd like to say thank you to all my family and supporters.
A lot of people keep asking me, who is your father to you? Do you think he's innocent? Has he changed? Well, the man who I met, the man who I got to know, he is a different man. He's a changed man. And he's an innocent man.
Tell me about your daddy.
My daddy loved me.
I met Dustin when I was 17 years old, and I fell head over heels for him. He's a very talented man. He's very smart. He's very genuine. He's very caring.
My father is my best friend. He's taught me so much in life. He's taught me to be a man. The man that stands here before you today, that's confident in speaking on his behalf.
Dustin treated everyone as his own and loved everyone with the same compassion and love that he had for his own.
All I could do is just keep on fighting to try to stay alive, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I'm an innocent man.
have this place to call home. Always.
But my dying words will always be, as it has been, I am an innocent man.
He was fun-loving. He loved to pull jokes on people. You know, he liked people to laugh. He was the oldest in the house. He was more or less our protector.
Hello, y'all. It's me, Sherelle again, community organizer, joined here with families who've been impacted by racialized violence. We're joined by Ms. Ali Gordon, Nisi and LaPrince Young, and also Billie Allen's sister, Yvette. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening to talk a little bit about the death row, its connections to racialized violence, and Billie Allen's case. LaPrince, I want to get started with you because you're joining us by phone. Could you just share a little bit about yourself, your family, and why you're here with us tonight?
Well, I'm here because of my brother, Liddell Lee. That was, once the Innocent Project got onto the case that he had, and he requested a DNA prior to them murdering him. But at that particular time, the state of Arkansas was so perpetuated on just killing people before the drug expired. So they ended up executing my brother, and then in May, we found out that he was innocent. So with that said, we have some attorneys that's looking into it to see what's the next project we're going to take on that, you know what I mean? But we told them it's not about a monetary value because you took an innocent man's life knowing that he did, and it was so weird because he really didn't have a chance because the judge, I was telling Yvette about this, you know, the judge that presided over his case, you know, he's married to the prosecutor, and he let her have her way in the courtroom, and everybody knew it, and they tried to get him off the case to recuse himself. He wouldn't recuse himself, so then he was appointing lawyers to my brother that was sitting for him when he was away. So it was pretty much a lynching what they did to my brother.
Wow, I appreciate your use of that powerful word lynching because I feel like that's very much an apt description. We were talking earlier with Billie's legal team, and they also know that there's DNA evidence that the state just won't let them get tested. And so you're telling me, LaPrince, that they didn't test the DNA until after your brother's execution, and the DNA evidence is exonerated.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about the process it took to even get that DNA finally tested? What did you have to do? What did your family have to do to get that done?
Well, what we had to do was, the ACLU and the Innocent Project had to join hand in hand because the lawyers prior to them had requested it from the state to do that. And 1 minute they supposed to have been lost my brother's clothing. Then they couldn't find the weapon, and they couldn't do this and that. So when the ACLU and the Innocent Project got on board, they had to file a lawsuit to get it done. And even so, at that particular time, the governor we had, the governor we still have now, Hutchinson, he was still on board against it too as well. So when they made a big fuss, they had news conference and things like that, what they did was they said, well, if you don't test this man's DNA, then you can possibly have a killer out there that you guys know nothing about. And what that did was made the community uproar by like, well, look, somebody out here doing so, so we need to find out who it is. And at the end of the day, they finally did the DNA. My brother was innocent, so he's still out there now. And this could have been done years before.
All right, LaPrince, tell us a little bit about your brother, Liddell. We often talk about folks who've been held captive on death row, and we only hear about their story after being sentenced. Can you tell us a little bit about who he was?
He was one of my older. I have two older brothers. He was one of my older brothers. And he worked. He had two daughters, and I'm not gonna say he was a model individual, but it did to him. You know, he didn't deserve it. That was not his MO and what they got him for. And the killing part about the whole situation was, you know, he was a very loving person, sure off his back, and doing the thing in the world for you. And people say he was just wrong place at the wrong time, which I don't understand. If I'm walking down my neighborhood where I live, and a murder took place somewhere within that neighborhood or whatever, and I'm walking, I'm a black man, that don't mean I did it. And that's basically what they did. And they had him on death row for like 24 years before they killed him. And
24 years.
even 24 years, the innocent everybody requested, you know, hey, if you so sure he did it, give him a DNA. Give him a DNA. Give him a DNA. They wouldn't do it. And after everything happened, Judge Wright, one of the judges that voted against him, you know, he said he wished that he had knew this, and that. It's too late to wish when you should have done the right thing. You can't go along with people just to get along.
Right.
Sometimes you gotta be that martyr and be like, you know what, I gotta stand for what's right. That was an injustice. You know what I'm saying? And you just can't do that because you want to be one of the good old boys. And that's what happened. Because if you Google it, you know, they had the CNN story and the Washington Post story, and then they did the doctor. I guess what you call the CNN show on it. They had the judge on there, and he pretty much apologized. That's what he did in so many words. You know, when they make their mistake, they're not gonna come out right. And if you're not smart enough to read between the lines, then you ain't gonna get it. Leslie Rutledge, whatever, she's still saying she don't believe the DNA that was presented by the Innocent Project, because she's trying to run for governor.
Wow.
She's turned general in Arkansas. It was just crazy, and to me, it's still like a shell shock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you know, I talked to my brother. I was telling you that. I was the last one to talk to my brother. He talked to me until his minutes ran out on the phone, and he told me, he said, "Man, you know, I ain't doing no crap like this and that." I rather, if he would go back a little bit, they offered him life without parole if he said he did. He said, "No, I'd rather die before I do this." So, but he did talk to me. I was the last person he talked to. He said, "Man, whatever you do," he said, "Man, clear my name." That's the last word. Then the phone cut off. I ain't talked to him since then.
Wow. And so in Arkansas, if I heard you correct, LaPrince, you said that they sped it up because they wanted to continue. They wanted to still use the drug that was in use at the time for federal execution.
Right. The judge had an expiration date on it.
Wow. Wow. So we're talking about political reasons coming into play as to why the DNA was never.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Well, I'm so sorry. It sounds like your family's been through a lot over the last 20 plus years in advocating and fighting for your innocence. I appreciate your fight. Do you have any words of advice or encouragement for other families who are still fighting to bring their loved ones home from death row?
Well, I tell them to, you know, push forward, don't give up, because they're gonna always come at you with, and just like some of the news stations called my family before all this stuff happened. They was like, they wanted to talk to you before so you can get, you know, what you gonna do afterwards. And we had faith, we're praying family, so we weren't thinking about they was gonna actually kill my brother. You know what I mean? And I tell everybody who's going through this, you gotta stay strong, steadfast, believe in your people, you know your people, and you know the system is corrupt. Well, the thing is, you know, whatever aspect you guys need me in, you know, I'm there for anybody, because I don't want no family to have to go through what we went through and what we continue to go through. So whatever I can do to help anybody, then I'm with it. You know, all you do is call me.
Thank you.
And I'm here for you guys.
We appreciate that. It's a testament to your character and strength as a leader to have gone through such a loss and still say, hey, I'm still in this fight in my brother's name to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Exactly.
LaPrince, I'm going to give you an opportunity to join us back again. I'm going to pose this question to Nisi, but really want to invite anyone to come off mute and answer it. And my question is, if you could share an action step for those who are at home watching, who want to support the families, who want to do something right now about the injustices that they're seeing, about federal death row, about Billie's case, what would that advice be? What would you tell folks at home who are watching this?
I personally would tell them to keep fighting, keep writing. Let's get some bills passed. You know, enough is enough. You know, when we can say when is enough, you know? So I just think that I would tell anyone who is, you know, in a situation that I was in, or anyone that's in like that, keep writing, you know, and keep the name alive. Don't wait to the very last minute. You know, keep it moving.
Keep it moving. That's it. That's the call to action right there.
My thing is, what I would say is, we band together, and like someone said previously, when is enough going to be enough? We can't continue to be their stepping stone, and they're progressing up our backs or our loved ones' back, because who to say who's next? So I think forming a coalition or something like that to speak out against it with people who've been affected by it, their loved one and things like that, bring more awareness, because it's crazy how they do our people. And you know, I'm tired of seeing people on a march. You know, that march, people get tired of marching. We need to have action now, and we need to stand together as one and say, look, enough is enough. We got to kill them, kill them and doing laws. Make them accountable for what they're doing. When they hide evidence, then hey, take them to court. Give them the same injustice they giving our people. Other than that, it won't never stop. And we know we as black people, we are the most forgiving people there are, and we gotta stop being that way. They hurt our people, and I'm tired of it. I really am. And you know, to hear my brother's voice, and not then to see the things that happened after him, it's like your life means nothing to them. And then they come up off our back. When are we gonna stop this?
Powerful call to action. You said no more unearned forgiveness. But when you found out that Trump had resumed federal executions and was going on a spree of executions over the last 2 months of his administration, how did you respond? What did that feel like at the time?
Well, I know I was getting a phone call every day, and it was like just feeling really anxious every day, not knowing, you know, if the name is going to be called. So I'm asking, you really tell me, like, how are they picking these people? So he's like, well, they're picking people, you know, that had cases with kids, and people that had anything to do with a woman. Or I was like, so what? I just didn't understand the method, by the way. So I'm just like, okay, so your life depends on basically Trump saying any, many, mighty, mo at this point, kind of, sort of. Wow. So, you know, he was calling me every day. He was like, oh, well, I got through this time. They just got 2 more and took them downstairs. I was like, oh my God. So every day was like an anxious feeling. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know, until that, you know, the day that it was inevitable, he called me and said, they taking me down. I was like, no. And I'm just like, oh my God, no. And he was more strong. I can say one thing, he was more strong than I was, because I was like going through it. I was a crybaby. He was not going through it. He was so strong. Even me going to see him a week prior to, you know, the execution, he was so strong. He just told me to keep the faith. And I think that's what gives me peace, because he was so strong. So, yeah.
Wow.
One of the things I wanted to share with LaPrince hit on, most people don't know that Emmett Till's father was lynched in Italy. And he was not allowed, hung, I'm going to say, for allegedly raping a white woman, which we hear from soldiers that was over there that he did not rape this woman. He left the base with this woman and stayed off for a weekend, which he was AWOL, but which a lot of the Caucasian men had done the same thing, but they made an example because she was white and he was black was the issue. And they set an example and they actually hung him, I understand, never allowing him to speak, to say anything on his behalf. Emmett's mother did not know why he was killed until Emmett's trial, the trial of the men that lynched him. And of course, at that point, that came up because they was trying to assassinate Emmett's character and saying, you know, like father, like son, an association. So this is not just started, and they are doing it overseas, LaPrince. They have been doing it, and it's not over today.
Wow. That's history I never knew, Ms. Allen. I appreciate you sharing. So there's a long history of white supremacist violence and lynching innocent Black men uh, from before the early 1900s through what we call modern day lynching through the federal death row and the death penalty in the States. So appreciate you making that connection.
Right. And we were in Washington, one of the last trips Erica and I took. She was on a panel at Howard University, and a gentleman came up to us and said, you know, he knew the story, and he never told us who he was, but he said, do you know about Lewis Till? And someone needs to bring that to the forefront. The public needs to be enlightened, and they need to hear that. Because he never got any justice at all. He didn't even spend any time. He wasn't allowed to even spend time on death row where he could fight for himself. This happened within a matter of days, is my understanding.
Wow.
So it has been happening, not just in the United States, but it's been happening all over. And our military men, they've been treated unjust. And, you know, we know of some. Unfortunately, there's so many that have lost their lives at the hands of white supremacists or at the hands of a crooked jury that we don't know of and never will hear of. But that's why we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep the names out there so that people know that we're not going to just sit by and be quiet. They would love for us to shut up, especially the state of Mississippi. They would like for Emmett Till's name to go away because that's such a blatant negative thing on that state. They are trying to do something to make it right, but they can't make it right. That's just a history that they're gonna have to live with.
Wow, wow. What does justice look like?
What does justice look like?
Yes, ma'am. What does justice look like?
You really don't want me to answer that.
We might need to talk about this offline when my federal agent isn't looking over the cameras.
Because you know, I would probably go too deep. So I'm gonna pass on.
I hear that when sometimes, yeah, maybe not today, but that in of itself is an answer. That what justice looks like, or is it something we can't even really articulate right now on this call, or you know, might not be ready to talk about it, or the masses might not be able to be ready to contend with what justice actually looks like.
Right.
Who are being held hostage, who have been killed by extra vigilante violence, by white supremacists, by the state. Right.
Right.
You know, justice for those who we've already lost, they're gone. There is no justice sometimes for folks who we've lost to.
Right. There is no justice. We can't breathe life back into them. Sure. But we can fight and keep it alive to educate the future, to educate the supremacists, and maybe somewhere along the line, some of them will change their mindset and the hatred that they have against another race, because I say racism is learned and they've been exposed to. Then maybe at that point we can start to bring some change. Because until we can educate and have people have a different mindset, we are not going to bring justice into the world. And you see it every day. And since we had number 45 in, it has become more blatant because he's made it okay, in a sense. And as long as we have people like that and they're empowered and they're strong and they're still spreading the hate, then we're not going to see any justice. You know, we look at we look at today, but let's go back to the indigenous. Let's look at the Indians. Look what they did to them. And they wiped them out pretty much, and they have no justice. And they go back way before the injustice started happening with the other races. You know, you look at it, you look at, even as you come closer, you look at the Holocaust, you look at how those people suffered. You look at the Mississippi Messiah, you look at how the Indians have been treated. And I could go on and on. It's, you know, you think we should be getting better, but looks like we're going backwards.
Yes. Come on through, Dr. Reverend Ollie Gordon, with that word. We appreciate you so much for making those connections. No, but you're real. You know, all this is built on an immoral land, on stolen lands, right? And so expecting justice out of a system that from the beginning was always built and designed to harm and oppress our people. Sometimes it's a tall order, right? And we have to think about, what do we do for ourselves? How do we get ourselves free and help each other? Which is why it's so beautiful to have LaPrince and Nisi here with Yvette. You know, some folks will experience a loss and say, I'm done. I'm going, too much has been taken from me. I'm going home now. But you both said, no, I'm going to show up for Yvette. I'm going to show up for Billie. I'm going to show up for the rest of the folks who are still being held on death row today. And that's both inspiring, beautiful, and commendable. And I just wanted to offer you both an opportunity, if there's anything else you wanted to share with folks at home who are listening, either about your loved ones who've been lost to state violence or anything else you want to share about Billie Allen's case, but wanted to, for one, recognize and appreciate the work that y'all are both putting in through such an immense loss. 3 years. Did the state ever apologize or admit guilt?
They still haven't done that to this day. When they had the big thing in May, when it was all around the world. It was even over in Great Britain, everywhere. Everybody was calling our phones. They wanted to do interviews, and we didn't want to do all that. And the state have yet today. They even on the CNN, they questioned the prosecutor, the head prosecutor. They questioned the governor, several people that was in authority. Two of the judges didn't want to have nothing to say about it. They have yet to apologize. They still say they're going to stick by what they have. Say it again.
Oh, I'm sorry, LaPrince. I was asking Nisi if they had a similar experience with any failings from this. I mean, we know the system has failed y'all in so many ways, but any really clear examples of the state failing to give due process?
Yes, that's why he had filed so many motions to get it pulled out, because they weren't going through all the evidence, and there were quite a few things that, he was going on, and everything was denied.
Wow.
Same thing with my brother. Same exact thing.
I want to allow Billie a chance to get in here. So we have Billie Allen on the phone, and I know he wants to say something to everyone online here before we let you all go. Yvette, you want to bring in Billie?
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to tell you I appreciate you. Some of you I've met, some of you I haven't met, but I want to thank you all for, joining in on this forum and voicing your opinion, because I feel like the more people speak about the injustices that are taking place, and you got to understand, everything everybody is saying, it's a pattern, wrongful convictions. It's the judges, it's the prosecutor, it's politics, it's a lot of things going on that a lot of people really don't understand. And I think that by bringing all these stories together, it shows a pattern. Just like in Lee's case, the wrongful conviction, they waited until after he was executed to test his DNA. They have refused me DNA testing for 24 years. What do they have to hide? If they claim that they want truth, they want justice, they want integrity, why are they denying people the evidence, to test the evidence that can exonerate people? So, I mean, it's every story is the same. We don't get attorneys who represent us at trial. They forget to present evidence. So when we come back with the evidence that proves our innocence, we still can't get any action in court. So, I mean, that's why I say I understand the pain. And the thing about Dustin, I was really close friends with Dustin. I went through his journey with him. I've seen his evidence. I'm talking about I've seen it. I've seen him put it in front of his judge, and the judge said it's harmless error. How is proving your innocence a harmless error in the court? Basically, you have to, what a lot of people fail to understand is the same judges that we are asking to overturn these convictions are the same attorneys who sat on the trials. So for them to have to overturn these convictions, they essentially have to admit that they sat back and did nothing while they watched this injustice take place. So that's the thing I think a lot of people need to realize. It needs to be a new system set up where the same judge who overlooks these cases can't come back and say, oh, I didn't do, or nothing went wrong on my watch, when you can clearly show these things. And to me, that's the most frustrating part. And that's the thing I can identify with all you all. The struggle that you went through emotionally, trying to fight for justice. I mean, this has been a 24-year fight for me. And what's so sad to me, I just lost my good friend, Dustin Higgs. And me and him, every day we went out there trying to, I'm talking about right before he got executed, he had stuff pending in court where the court even said, look, we need to hold this execution off because we need to review this evidence. But because they were so bloodthirsty to execute people at that time, they were willing to ignore the law. That should scare people. That should scare people. I don't care if you care about us or not. The fact that they can convict anybody, the way they're convicting people and the way they're denying us access to the law to test evidence, but yet if the government asks, the court will grant their motions every single time. All people have to do is check the records. Every time they've asked to test their DNA to convict you, they grant the government's motions or the state's motion. But when the defendant asks them to check the same DNA, they will deny it every single time. And to me, that's why this is called Stomping Out Justice. People need to get out there in the streets and really voice their opinions on all these cases, on all these situations. The thing about Emmett Till has the same problem, and that's the thing. This happened so long ago, but the same thing is happening. It's just become more modernized in today's society. That's the thing. It's hidden. It was so clear back. I mean, it was out of the open back then. It's hidden now because they know people aren't going to go to those law books and read what's going on. They know people aren't going to go online and read about all the flaws in these cases. But that's why people need to speak up. That's why people need to hit the streets and start holding up the DNA. Like in Lee's case, they need to hold up the DNA, put the actual DNA out there so people can see it. So people can't say, oh, I didn't know about this case. Same thing with Emmett Till. Keep putting his story out there. Keep showing people, look, we continue to make the same problem. Same thing with Dustin Higgs. Put the statements out there that show he was innocent. Same thing with my case. Put the DNA out there that shows I was innocent. Everybody on this forum has a story. And the thing is, if you put all these pieces of evidence, how can people in Washington ignore it? We have a stronger voice by saying, look, we're not just saying the injustice is going on. We're going to show you that the injustice is going on. And that's why I say you will have to keep on pushing, keep on showing your anger, because to me, it's the thing that's missing in this struggle. Don't get me wrong. If I got home tomorrow and they exonerated me, yes, I will be at peace because I'm home with my family, but I'll be mad as hell because I know they will keep doing the same thing to the next person behind me. And that's what I think is missing in this fight. People think it's okay that they let us go or let innocent people go. The thing is, we have to keep our voices loud. I need you all, and that's the thing. I need you all to continue to voice your anger. Continue to tell those stories. Make people feel the pain that you went through all those years. Because trust me, I'm tired. I've been fighting 24 years. My sister has been fighting hard for me. I know I'm a burden on my family. And that's what's so sad. They love me. They're willing to go all out for me. But I know that it pains them to constantly carry this weight with me. Because it's time I don't even want to carry this burden. You got to realize it's time I sat in here and I want to give up so bad. Just to not only just to give up the whole thing is a good thing and it's a bad thing. I've held on to it because I believe that my freedom should come. But at the same time, when you constantly put motions and appeals in front of these courts and they deny, that shit hurts. I'm talking about that shit hurts because your hope is like, man, finally they're going to do the right thing. And then when they don't, you're like, man, should I give up? Should I continue to feel pain? Don't get me wrong, my outlet is my art. So my art allows me to let that pain go. But at the same time, I'm human. I still need to feel that human contact in the world. And they deny me that. They deny me that on something I didn't even do. And like I said, I've had the opportunity to talk to Miss Ali. I know her pain is that. And like I said, I wanted her to keep on telling that story. I haven't talked to Nisha yet, but I know he is. I know he cared about her. I know he cared about his son. I know he wants his story to continue to be told because he wanted justice for not only himself, he wanted justice for everybody. That's what I want people to walk away from. That's why I appreciate you always sharing your story. It's not just small, like what you all are doing, voicing your opinion. I think it's big because we need to come together and show people this proof. Let's stop saying no justice, no peace. Show them the evidence. Show them that we have been wrong, that we continue to be wrong in the system. They can't deny evidence. Yeah, they can deny your voice. They can deny your chance. They can deny your calls for peace, justice, and everything. But one thing they can't do, they can't turn their back on the truth and on evidence.
Ashe, thank you, Billy. I appreciate you being here with us. Miss Ali, Miss Nisi.
Yeah.
I appreciate y'all so much for being here. I want to give y'all the opportunity to say anything else before we let y'all go.
Well, I'm listening to Yvette's brother, and he says 24 years. And I know that's a long time to be locked behind those doors away from your family. And I pray that God will let them release him and see his innocence. We've been out here fighting for 65 years, actually 67, 68 now, and still no justice. But we have to continue to fight. We tried to get the immaterial anti-lynching bill passed, and of course, it passed in the Congress, but not in the Senate. John Paul or Rand Paul, he blocked it. You had to have 100%. Because he was saying that we already have a law against murder, but murder and lynching in his eyes is the same thing, and he doesn't want to, that opens up a gate for people to come in with a whole lot more cases. So they're still not trying to pass that bill, but we're still pressing on and trying to fight for it.
Wow. I know I speak for everyone watching when I say that our hearts are with you. You all carry an unmanageable burden, and we lift you up in any way that we can. And there are many ways that you can get involved. You can help by spreading the word. Learn more about Billie's case and see the evidence for yourself by visiting freebillyallen.com. There, you can join us in the fight by adding your name to Billie's sign-on letter, calling for any controlling authority to grant a retrial where full evidence can be considered. You can also make your voice heard by purchasing a 10-pack of postcards featuring Billie's powerful artwork to raise awareness and call on President Biden, Attorney General Garland, and members of Congress to free Billie Allen. We cannot do this without your support. A fair retrial can bring Billie home. We can set a precedent that can lead to the commutation of all people on federal death row and pass the Federal Death Penalty Prohibition Act of 2021, abolishing the death penalty under federal law. Now, please join me in welcoming our next performer, Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter, producer, and instrumentalist, Seth Glier.
Hello, my name is Seth Glier. I'm a singer-songwriter from Western Massachusetts, and it is a privilege to be with you this evening. I've come to know Billie over the last few years, exchanging letters back and forth, first with his sister and now with Billie directly. I've also come to know Billie a little bit deeper by being a recipient of his artwork behind me. Billie asked me to play this song, and this song was inspired by a morning I woke up in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I was walking around town. They have the gallows still in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and they're now a tourist attraction. And there was a school field trip taking place at the gallows. And at the end of the school field trip, there was a group of fourth graders. The tour guide was standing on the top of the gallows and looking at the group of kids. And at the end of her presentation, she said, "Now who wants to climb up here and pull the lever?" And one by one, I watched these kids climb up the ladder and pull the lever, and the floor dropping out, and everyone kind of oohing and awing in the way that kids do. And I thought about my own upbringing, and I thought about when I learned the word justice and how I learned it. And in this country, far too often, justice continues to be a form of retribution. And I wanted to sort of unpack that in this song. This is a song called Justice for All. Billie, this is for you. Mm-hmm. 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 From the courthouse straight to the courthouse alone. The crowd began to gather as they tied their first knot. Stood him at the gallows and walked him up the stairs. They tied his feet together while a preacher said a prayer. Who gonna pull your lever?
watch you fall. Justice pulls the lever, and there's justice for all. Gonna pull your lever. 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 The beam began to buckle, and the crow began to fly. The noose began to tighten while the preacher stepped aside. The poplar trees did howl, and the wind began to rise, and blew his kicking body side to side. Who gonna pull your lever? Who gonna watch you fall? Justice pulls the lever, and there's justice for all. Who gonna pull your lever? Who gonna watch you fall? Justice pulls the lever, and there's justice for all. Who gonna pull your lever? Who gonna watch you fall? Just gonna pull your lever. Who gonna pull your lever? Who gonna watch you fall? Just gonna pull the lever. Who gonna pull your lever? Who gonna watch you fall? Just gonna pull the lever, and there's justice for all.
What a beautiful performance. Thank you for being with us tonight, Seth. Much of the nation and the world is in agreement that capital punishment must end. So we must continue to ask, why hasn't it? Especially given the number of wrongful convictions that result in the death penalty. And there are a number of factors that drive those wrongful convictions: inadequate legal defense, false or misleading forensic evidence, false accusations or perjury by witnesses, among many others. In 2018 alone, there were 111 exonerations involving witnesses who lied on the stand or falsely accused the defendant, and 79% of homicide exonerations involved misconduct by police, prosecutors, or both. Our next guest will be discussing the evolution of capital punishment in the United States, what's happening across the country in a post-Trump era, and what we can do to abolish the death penalty once and for all. It's my honor to welcome our next group of speakers, businessman, advocate, and host of Wrongful Conviction podcast, Jason Flom, motivational speaker, author, prison reform activist, and member of the Exonerated Five, Dr. Yusef Salaam.
Yusef, it's so good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. You talk a lot about finding your purpose in your wrongful conviction. And I know from my organizing days back in New York City, you've certainly been putting in work for lots of decades. Curious, what do you think it'll take for real change to happen?
So, when I think about where we are, I remember as a part of the fight that I found myself in since I was 15 years old, I would think about the injustice in such a way and say, the system is broken. And I would say things like that, and I really would believe it. I would say things like the system is alive and well. And it wasn't until more recent times when the events that have been unfolding, I realized that the system was alive and sick. I realized that the system was not broken, that it's actually working exactly as it was imagined in the minds of its creators. And so that poses a different type of challenge, because when you look at that truth, what you find is that all of the things that we've been fighting against has been all against and all this huge uphill battle. And part of my answer, I want to say, has to deal with what my mother told me when I was a youngster. It followed me all throughout my prison life. It followed me even till now. And what she said to me was, they need you to participate in whatever it is that they're trying to do. She told me not to participate, to refuse. And so when I think about what we need to do to change the system, is we need to free our minds, first of all. And we need to understand where we are in this fight, right? We need to understand who we are in this fight, why we are, and all of the dynamics that goes along with that. I look at my story and I realize that it's a story of survival, but survival for who? Not necessarily for me, but it's survival to tell other people how to also be free, how to free themselves from the systemic issues that we've been experiencing, how all of these things are not disconnected, but a part of the whole. And so it's this mesh that we've been fighting against to free ourselves. And sometimes we find some rooms to breathe through the mesh, but it's the whole mesh, right? And all of us have to do our part to dismantle the system that's not broken, to really abolish the system and build a system of inclusivity with the bricks. That inclusivity has to really reflect the kaleidoscope of the human family.
Ashe, so this system cannot be reformed. It needs to be abolished.
Absolutely not. It has to be abolished. This system was created. It's alive and sick. We thought it was broken. We were given Band-Aids to the little pieces that we were saying. And more importantly, I think, as victims of the system, we weren't giving an accurate description, right? And so we didn't do what Dr. James Baldwin said. He said the victim who can articulate the situation ceases to be the victim, but they now become the threat. And I think now we are threatened. We're more than threatening to the system, because now we have their playbooks. Now we see their props on their stage, right? I speak about this in my book, Better Not Bitter, because like I said, as a survivor, it's not just survival for me. And it's not just me telling the story of injustice through the Central Park jogger case, but it's me connecting that injustice to the greater dynamic of oppression in America, 400 plus years of this type of oppression. And how we fight, right? How we stand up and say, no, I'm gonna turn my light up. You're trying to mute me. And I'm gonna use the microphone and echo this voice around the world.
Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate that you talk about your experiencing being connected to a broader struggle against systemic racism, right, and anti-Blackness, at least at the state level. We know the last few months of Trump's administration, he went on a virtual killing spree, right, executing several folks in the last 2 months of his presidency, which was unprecedented. We also know Trump didn't have a small role in your wrongful conviction, at least not in the public eye. So curious what other parallels you see between what happened to you, federal death row, and Billie Allen's case.
You know, when I think about the Donald Trumps of the world, and I'm going to say the Donald Trumps of the world because I don't believe that he operates individualistically, right? He's a part of the system of white supremacy, white male dominance that we've been fighting against. And when we realize it as such, we realize that him taking out a full-page ad in 1989 calling for the death penalty for my case, it was the duality of America that we live in that we realized, which said they're guilty and they have to prove themselves innocent. You gotta understand, Donald Trump did this 2 weeks after we were accused. It wasn't 2 weeks after we had gone to trial. We haven't even gone to court really yet, other than being arraigned. And it was 2 weeks after we were accused, and in the seeing of our skin and judging us by that color and not the content of our character, he chose to take $85,000 of his own money, which was a lot of money then, and it's most certainly a lot of money now, and call for the death penalty. You got to remember and understand that when you look at that isolated incident, you understand the fullness of what it is until you realize that they had published our names, phone numbers, and addresses in New York City's newspapers. This meant that people could just show up right in front of our door, 14, 15, and 16-year-old children, to harass us. This meant that they could send us hate mail calling for our deaths and the deaths of our parents and loved ones. And rightly so, right? Because a little while later after that, what happens? Pat Buchanan writes in the papers, why don't we just take the eldest one and hang him from a tree in Central Park? Why don't we take the others and horsewhip them? This wasn't the 1950s, as if that might have made it better. This was 1989, 1990. These headlines could be captured in a book, very, very powerful book by a young lady named Natalie Byfield, who wrote a book called Savage Portrayals. And I mention all of that stuff because we're looking at this other case, right? This case, the parallels of this case is the truth about the parallels of these cases, right? And I want to say cases instead of case, because these are not anomalies, right? All of these cases represent a real horror story in America. It is the truth that Malcolm X would call the American nightmare. You got to think, like, many of us, we wanted the American dream. We dreamed about the American dream. We were told that this was the land of milk and honey. But we were also told that we would be dead or in jail before we reached the age of 21. And many of us were not able to escape that gravitational pull, that seed of technology that was placed in our communities that we believe. And I only say that we believe it because so many of us have not escaped the jail or death before the age of 21.
Jump over to Jason real quick, and Yusef, I'm gonna come back to you in a second, but you were talking a lot about wrongful convictions. And I know, Jason, you've been doing a lot of your life's work on behalf of the wrongfully convicted. Curious, in what ways has the system failed those who've been wrongfully convicted? I know Yusef brought up a lot around like the system isn't broken, but in working the way it's supposed to. So I'm curious if you share that same assessment, or if there's some other ways that our courts, our system has failed folks on the inside.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And the answer is there's too many ways for us to even list them here. I think Dr. Salaam touched on the idea, a different way of saying the same thing that he said, is that in America, it's better to be rich and guilty than poor and innocent, right? I forgot who coined that phrase, but it's true. Or as Lenny Bruce said all those years ago, in the halls of justice, the only justice is in the halls. So, you know, the fact is, the system was already horribly tilted towards the prosecution. You know, Lady Justice, we all know, with the blindfold and the scales, right? And they're even. They never were even, right? They were always, it was always a situation where the prosecution has virtually endless resources and the benefit of the doubt, right? Because an everyday juror believes, and my friend Josh Dubin has proven this in his research, the overwhelming majority of jurors believe that if somebody's in that defendant's chair, they must have done something to get themselves there. So, so you start with that. Then you have the fact that the prosecution has endless resources. The defense has very limited resources. If the person is locked up waiting trial, because we have this bizarre system where we lock people up if we don't know if they're guilty or not, because they can't pay bail money, then their chances go down even further because they have no ability to be able to meaningfully interact with their own representatives or mount an effective defense. They can't take their attorney, for instance, to the scene of the crime or show them where they were when the crime was actually committed or anything like that. And that's just one very mundane example. So now what's happened is, over the past 40 years or so, as mass incarceration has exploded and become really the new slavery, right? Is that the new Jim Crow? Is that what was already terrible has gotten much, much worse, because now you have a system that just processes people through guilty pleas because there's too many of them, right? Our prison population has grown by over 700% in the past 40 years. So the caseload has become completely unmanageable. You have lawyers handling 400 cases a year, public defenders, right? So courts aren't open on the weekends. So do the math. It's about 1.5 a day, every day. That doesn't include vacation days they may get to take, you know. So maybe it's close to 2 a day. So, which is why at the end of the day, and then I'll stop, is, you know, we have this thing called hashtag guilty plea problem, right? Which I encourage people to go and check it out. The guilty plea problem basically means that 97% of felony convictions in America are the result of guilty pleas. We'll never know how many of those guilty pleas were people who were actually innocent and smart, right? I mean, because, and when I say that, how can you be smart if you plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit? Well, because back to the fact that the prosecutor has all the power and can sit there and say, listen, you're going, if you go to trial, Sherelle, you seem like a nice person, but you know what? And this is like taken from a real conversation, right? Of a guy who I've been trying to help. You seem like a nice guy, no convictions before, good job, but you know what? If you go to trial, I'm going to murder you, right? The prosecutor actually said that to my guy. And that means if he went to trial, he was going to get 40 years or more. And he's offering him a plea of, 5 or 7 and could be 3. My friend Messiah Johnson got offered a plea of 3 years. He wanted to take it. The judge wouldn't allow him, and he ended up getting 137 years. So it's like, talk about leverage.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Imagine you're a defendant and your lawyer doesn't even know your name, maybe, right? Maybe they reek of alcohol. Maybe they don't know anything about your case. Maybe you've never met them until the day of the trial. And you're looking and going, wait a minute, I'm doomed. I better take a plea. So yeah, that's some of the ways. Sorry for the long answer to that very good question.
That's great. I'm over here taking mental notes, and I hope folks at home watching are as well. We see your T-shirt here says Wrongful Conviction Podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing on behalf of the wrongfully convicted and how folks watch can get involved?
Yeah, well, the Wrongful Conviction Podcast is my sort of labor of love. Started about 5 years ago. Dr. Salaam has been a guest on it. Has had the very first guest actually was Raymond Santana. I went back and re-listened to that episode recently, and basically my thought was, if we can tell these stories in a way that touches people, which means interviewing the actual person who lived that experience. And many of the people we interview, like Richard Glossop this week, is on death row, as we interviewed him on death row. Then we have an opportunity to change hearts and minds, not just of potential jurors, but of voters, of politicians, of decision makers. And so I encourage people, and it's actually worked. We know that we've had an impact on the outcome of certain hearings and trials. We know that there are people in very high positions of power that are listening to. We know that legislation has been passed, has been proposed and passed. For instance, in Washington State, where our podcast inspired a legislator named Strom Peterson to propose, and this is at very Central Park 5, right? This is right on point. So he proposed legislation that the governor signed about a month ago that makes it mandatory for all interrogations to be recorded. Now, why should we even have to do a bill? It's so obvious, right? But now, that's a thing. So hopefully there will be quite a number of people who will not go to prison for crimes they didn't commit because of that bill. And that'll be enough for me. That right there, I'm good, but we're going to keep doing this. We've had about 30 million people listen so far. I hope the people that are watching us now will start to listen. We really should highlight Billie's case on there if that's something that he would want. And his case certainly points out a lot of the problems in the system. Here's a guy, I'm just going to go off topic for a second, although it's on topic. Here's a guy who has an airtight alibi, right? With receipts, with videos. He wasn't there. So, he's not a time traveler. He's not a ghost. I don't think anybody's making that claim. He wasn't there because he couldn't have been there because he was somewhere else. But there he sits on death row for a crime that he obviously didn't commit. He didn't commit it, but not only didn't commit, he couldn't have committed it. So that, inside his case, and I hope everybody will get involved in that case, it's a microcosm of all the terrible aspects of our system.
Absolutely. And folks at home watching should definitely Google Billie Allen and get in touch with us about how you can contribute and do some good work on behalf of Billie and his family. I'm glad
Billie with an I-E on the end. Billie I-E on the end.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said we got to make sure people know it's Billie with an I-E on the end.
Billie with
there's
I-E.
a lot of Billie Allens
out
there.
Billie. And I'm glad that you bring Billie's case up. One of my first sort of introductions into movement work was through Troy Davis's case. I was a college student, and I remember that there was just so much reasonable doubt. That was, in fact, it was like hashtag reasonable doubt, that I was like, there's no way in the world they're going to execute this man. But we see it happen all the time. And one of the groups that was instrumental on the ground at the time was Amnesty International. And so I want to bring in my good friend, sis, badass organizer, strategist, Chrissy Roth, into this discussion. Chrissy, can you situate for us Billie Allen, federal death row, within the context of the political uprisings that have been happening over the last couple of years?
Well, thanks, Sherelle. It's always great to spend virtual time with you. Maybe one day we'll get to see each other in person again. In any event, yeah, I mean, I think that the events of, the last year, right now we're sitting just hours after Derek Chauvin has been sentenced, and we think about the summer that preceded this one. People from around the US and every state and also around the globe took to the streets because they realized something that a lot of people that look like us already know, that this justice system does not treat people fairly if they look like us. And particularly at the hands of law enforcement, like the history of slave patrols coming out of the South has huge influence over what policing looks like today in America, and colonialism in other countries around the world. So I think that people are starting to understand that, and it's sad, but unfortunately these horrific cases like the one of George Floyd help people understand exactly how bad things can be before some modicum of justice occurs. And, I think that there's a lot of energy around that movement. There's a lot that's taken place since then, a lot of good things, steps in the right direction. And I think a lot of those folks that recognize the challenges with policing and ways that it simply can't be fixed are also seeing that in the other areas of our justice system, our so-called justice system, like the death penalty. And while that's the end of the justice system, not the front end, like policing, one wants to believe that if someone is sentenced to death and convicted after such a trial that one would imagine has fairness to it, that must be right. And it simply isn't. And we certainly know that that's true. We look at cases like Yusef, and there are over 180 folks that have been exonerated from death row in the modern era of the death penalty in the US. And frankly, from Amnesty's perspective, we oppose the death penalty in all cases. So innocence is not important for us, but it's clear that, as Yusef said, well, the system is sick and tended to work this way. The death penalty system needs to go. And I can say that firmly and clearly, and I think that others who are advocating for similar types of changes in other areas of the justice system are seeing the connections there too, and we're pleased to see this enthusiasm. Unfortunately, though, at the hand of a very irrational, or at the hands of an administration that chose to resuscitate the federal executions.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. I appreciate you bringing in the connection between the death penalty and the broader movement. I'm an abolitionist like Dr. Salaam, and I often talk about how death penalty to me is the sharpest edge of the system. And as a tactic towards defunding the police and abolition at large, I think that this is such an important fight for everyone to be a part of. You mentioned this current administration and federal death row. Do you think that Biden's going to keep his promise in abolishing the federal death row, or what steps do you think we can take, all of us at home, in making sure that that happens?
Well, it's an important question, and I know that there have been a lot of people making a lot of noise, Amnesty included, for many months, and we haven't seen movement. The sort of most recent news we've seen is that the Department of Justice is attempting to seek a death sentence for the Boston Marathon bomber, and yet we just heard maybe a day after that the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, said that there will be some announcement with regard to the death penalty. And so it's clear that we need to continue to keep the pressure up, but there are a lot of different things that the structures of power and politics here can do. The president, for example, has the authority under the Constitution to commute federal death sentences, any and all of them, if he would like. And so certainly that's something that we ask for, and lots of other partners do as well. The Department of Justice has the ability to, they can stop seeking the death penalty altogether. They can withdraw authorization for death penalty cases. They can withdraw the lethal injection protocol, which is the means by which that brought back the executions under the Trump administration. They can dismantle the death chamber on federal death row at Terre Haute Prison, FCC Terre Haute, where Billie Allen is. And there are also really dangerous regulations that were put in place in December of 2020. And even if this administration never chooses to carry out any executions, leaving these things in place were there to be whoever comes after these administrations, a change of heart, certainly that would be very dangerous for anyone that's still on death row, assuming that they haven't gotten rid of it, right? So they do very much need to. The Department of Justice should address these regulations that would make it quick, that would probably expedite the process of some of these executions. Certainly Congress has a role to play, and I think we've been really heartened to see Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and Congressman Espaillat on the same day introduce legislation to abolish the federal death penalty that goes more than where most states do. Most states say, we'll abolish the death penalty and replace it with life in prison without parole, but these pieces of legislation actually allow for resentencing of anyone who's under federal sentence of death, which we think is certainly a very important step in the right direction. And so, we're certainly hopeful about that. And the president did express during his candidacy that he supports Congress working towards passing this legislation. He would look forward to signing it and working to incentivize states' ability to also follow suit. And so we're going to keep the pressure up. Just because executions aren't happening at the federal level in the news doesn't mean that there are a lot of other things going on. Last year, the US was under universal periodic review, which is when other countries around the world get to say, what's your human rights record look like? And a lot of the states, about a third of these countries around the globe said, y'all need to get rid of this federal death penalty. This is a problem. So I think it's clear we've been sent a message, and at the very least, it's clear that this administration wants to promote racial equity. They want to return the US's state as a respected state with regard to human rights and international relations. And this is a really simple thing that they could do. So, we're hopeful that that whole list of things I named, they do all of them, not just one. But it's not going to happen without all of us making a lot of fuss about it. So I hope that folks watching will find a way to get involved. And I know that that there will be some postcards that folks can fill out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chrissy. And thank you for making plain the stakes on why it's important to abolish federal death row right now. Where can folks follow your work or get involved?
Yeah, well, you can go to it's amnestyusa.org. There's a death penalty page there. You can also follow us on Twitter. It's the same. It's hashtag amnestyusa rather is our hashtag or handle on Twitter. So follow us there. We engage in the work at the federal and the local level. We work with activists and advocates like Sherelle and partner organizations to pass legislation so that we don't have to deal with these problems anymore, as well as individual cases where we're seeing. And I do want to speak to, as much as there have been really positive gains, it's wonderful to see an administration that has made statements about their interest in ending the death penalty, but statements are nice, actions are better. And while we've also seen in the past year, Virginia abolished the death penalty, which is great news. I'm a Virginian, so I feel wonderful about that. The first state in the South to undo this punishment. We've also seen some backslides too, and we have to be careful about that stuff too. States that are looking to use methods of execution that fit in the category of barbaric, like firing squads and new experimental ways of using gas. One state that's even trying to use a type of gas in their execution that was the same used by the Nazis, and as a Jewish woman, that's just not okay. So I think that we have to be really careful about what we need to play defense on as well, as far as pushing forward so that other people some folks can get free.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. I appreciate that. Yusef, Dr. Salaam, if you had one action step for folks at home watching, something they can do right now, what would that be?
I would say get involved, but I want to contextualize the get involved and what it means and why. I was looking at something to share that would perhaps paint the picture. And I thought about what my late attorney, Bill Kunstler, said at SUNY Buffalo, May 13th, 1995. He passed away before I actually got out of prison. So he never got an opportunity to experience the freedom that he was fighting for with regards to me, but also the fact that we were exonerated, right? He said at SUNY Buffalo, at any time you're faced with an injustice, you're in a position to do something you have to do something. And that's the terrible myth of organized society, that everything that's done through the established system is legal. And that word has a powerful psychological impact. It makes people believe that they're is an order to life and an order to a system. And that person that goes through this order and is convicted has gotten all that is due him. And therefore, society can turn his consciousness off and look to other things in other times. And that's the terrible myth about these past trials. It's that they have this aura of legitimacy, this aura of legality. I suspect that better men than the world has known, and many more of them have gone to their deaths through a legal system than all through the illegalities in the history of man. 6 million people in Europe during the Third Reich, legal. Sacco Vanzetti, quite legal. The Haymarket defendants, legal. The hundreds of rape trials throughout the South where Black men were condemned to death, all legal. Jesus, legal. Socrates, legal. And that's the kaleidoscopic nature of what we live through here and in other places, because all tyrants learn that it is far better to do this thing through some semblance of legality than to do it without that pretense. I'm saying that to say, I should say I'm echoing that to say that we have to be involved. We have to participate. Non-participation is participation. We say that when we look at laws and when people go into the voting polls and things like that. And I think it's a totality of everything that we involve ourselves in, right? Or fail to involve ourselves in. We can't hire people in positions, say for instance, in the presidency, and then go back to sleep and let them do whatever it is that they're going to be doing. I think past presidencies, past public offices have taught us that we have a voice, right? We look at the Constitution of the United States, and even though it says we the people, and we pause right there and understand that we were not considered full human beings back then. We were considered 3/5 of a person. We were pushed to the margins of life. There's never been a reform to that document, just like there's never been reform to the 13th Amendment. And I think when we look at all of these things, it tells us that we have the great ability to change everything about tomorrow. I shouldn't say late, she's not dead. My professor, Dr. Marimba Ani, I never forget, she said to us one day in class, she's a protege of Dr. John Henry Clark, by the way. She said that if we decided tomorrow that their system ceases to exist, tomorrow their system will cease to exist. The only way that this becomes true is that we have to understand that we are now the people. We have the choice to lean in, to dig deep, and to change everything. Why? Why do we have that choice, and how do we prove it to ourselves? We know this to be a truth because guess what? We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. We know this when George Floyd was murdered. Our ancestors' wildest dreams poured out into the streets, and the streets erupted, and the language was new. The language is abolition. The language was about defunding. Not because we wanted to live in a system of lawlessness, but that we knew that the system that we were under was a system of oppression. That same oppressive knee that was on his neck has been on our necks and on our backs. That same oppressive knee found its way in the chokehold through Eric Garner's murder, in a city where we find the words on the side of cop cars, courtesy, professionalism, and respect. They didn't even give him the first letters off of the cop car, right? That on top of the fact that we have underneath the words to serve and protect. That wording is found in almost every state, on almost every cop car throughout the nation, to serve and protect in some variation. But look at where we are. It's laughable. But at the same time, they need us to participate in whatever it is that they're trying to do.
I think there's no better note to wrap us up on than that one, Dr. Salaam. All power to the people. I appreciate that.
Thank you all for your contributions. We recognize and honor your work in creating a more just world for us all. Those of you at home can still support the Free Billie Allen campaign. You can donate directly on PayPal at paypal.me/4BillieJAllen, or purchase original artwork and prints by Billie Allen at our online auction by visiting bit.ly/FreeBillieAllenAuction. Continue to educate yourself and others on the facts of Billie Allen's case at freebillyallen.com and use your voice to raise awareness and bring an end to the federal death penalty. Here to discuss his many uses of art in creating social change, let's welcome social justice entrepreneur, writer, and speaker, Halim Flowers.
Justice is more than a lady holding scales, blindfolded from the bias by which institutions fail, to consider mercy as an equitable force, instead of offering punishment as our only course. Victims can't heal by caging kids instead. For equal justice, 13th Amendment must be repealed. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Halim Flowers. I am an ambassador for Represent Justice. At the age of 16, I was given 2 life sentences in the District of Columbia, through which I served 22 years of incarceration and was released in March of 2019. Upon my release, I was blessed to to earn the fellowship from the Halcyon Arts Lab in Echoing Green. And also, shortly thereafter, I became an ambassador for Represent Justice, which allows me to use my voice, my story, my creativity as a performance and spoken word and visual artist to highlight change, whether it's in museums or art galleries, and the conversations curated around my visual artworks to enlighten people about what I believe to be the inhumane practices in our criminal legal system that do not take into account justice, love, and empathy, or compassion, love, and empathy. So therefore, I don't believe that it's justice. Last year, I was blessed to meet Mr. Billie Allen, and upon meeting him through another individual I know that's on death row, Billie Allen, he asked me to review his website, and he said that I don't want to persuade you to take an opinion about my case. I just want to present the evidence to you, and after you review the evidence, if you decide that I'm innocent, then I ask that you help me to regain my freedom. And I reviewed the evidence with an impartial eye, and I believe that Mr. Billie Allen is innocent. I implore any one of you listening today to go to BillieAllen.com, review the evidence, and if you find that this human being, this incredible artist is innocent, then I ask that you use your voice, your resources to uplift this story so that he's not made invisible and forgotten, so that his life is not exterminated on death row, and that this human being who has been falsely convicted and accused of a crime that he did not commit have the opportunity to return back to our society. Go to BillieAllen.com. Also go to RepresentJustice.com. We rep justice, to see the work that this organization is doing to uplift the stories and the plights of individuals like Billie Allen. So for me, someone who has served 22 years of incarceration, has been able to return back to our society, impact the world globally through my artworks, enlighten people who have never been exposed or their loved ones have never been exposed to the criminal legal system about what goes on in our nation in relation to how we treat individuals accused and convicted of crimes. It's been an honor for me to access these platforms that I've been extended, and I want to use my voice here today to uplift Billie Allen and to support his campaign so that he returns back to his family. I thank you all for listening to me, and once again, I ask you, please visit BillieAllen.com, review the evidence. If you find that he's innocent, then please do your part to use your voice and your resources to make sure that this human being comes back to his family so that he can continue to share his beautiful artwork and creativity with us in society while being in society. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your art and story with us, Halim. Your means of creative expression undoubtedly creates spaces of safety and healing for so many. Don't forget to visit the freebillyallen.com website to learn more about his case and how you can get involved and join in on the conversation by using the hashtag FreeBillieAllen. Thank you all for joining us here tonight. As we end the night more energized and ignited to continue this fight to bring Billie Allen home, we have a special closing treat to take us home. The Resistance Revival Chorus is a collective of more than 60 women and non-binary singers who joined together to bring joy and song into the resistance, to uplift and center women's voices, and sing protest songs in tribute to the historical importance of music in the protest movement. Let's welcome Resistance Revival Chorus. I hope you all enjoy, and good night.
It isn't right for too many falling. They say it's in the name of the greater good. Oh, we lost sight. World is getting colder. What happened to the words for which we once stood? I will stand for you. Would you stand for me? Everybody deserves to be free. I would lend a hand to you. Would you lend a hand to me? Everybody deserves to be free. It's close tonight, but I'll leave a candle burning. Your way home won't give up the fight. Stories ain't over, no. I won't let you walk all alone. I will stand for you. Would you stand for me? Everybody deserves to be free. Lend a hand to you. Would you lend a hand to me? Everybody deserves to be free. Say, if you feel like I do, stand with me. If you hurt like I do, stand with me. If you feel like I do, stand with me. If you hurt like I do, stand with me. Yeah. If you think it's a shame, if it gives you the blues, oh, I'm telling you, I will stand for you. Would you stand for me?